This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I'm your host, Todd Kirk, and one of these things is not like the other. I am joined by my two bald compatriots,
Yes.
Casey and Chandler.
Low blow. Low blow.
Sorry, guys. I was looking at it and I was like, y'all look like twinners,
Beautiful.
and I look different. Man, Casey, always glad to have you here. We are joined today by the head of our learning experience team here at Brainstorm. We've been trying this year to bring in some of our favorite people who we've known for many, many years. Casey and I have both known Chandler Milne, who is on today for over a decade. And Chandler's awesome. We're super glad that he was willing to take some time out of his day. Chandler, welcome to the first time to SaaS Therapy, my friend.
Thank you, Todd. Casey, great to be here. And yeah, it's okay if I Venmo you for those nice words. Like, I don't carry cash around right now, but
All right, Chandler. As we get started, I think it'll be helpful for people to understand. Yeah, I mean, Todd said, your over learning experience. What does that actually mean? Explain to the audience what your role is, what you oversee here at Brainstorm, so they get a bit of a flavor of the questions we're going to ask you today.
totally. So, at Brainstorm, our emphasis and focus is on outcomes. Helping people adopt new ways of working and new technology. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's just a lot of pieces to that puzzle, but we know there are a few pieces that are pretty necessary. We need learning content, we need communication, we need something that tells that story. My team is responsible for the development of not just the content, but ultimately the recipe, if you will, to create outcomes. So the learning experience team is designing and intentionally choreographing experiences that lead to outcomes, not to just learning consumption sort of stuff. So yes, my team has the privilege of making a lot of really great content, and technology is constantly changing. So we're running in that hamster wheel all day. But we're also really emphasizing and spending a lot of time thinking about the science and the art of change, of transformation, of learning. And so it's an area of personal passion of mine, and excited to, jump into that and get to do that every single day. Think about how do we help people achieve outcomes, and what are the necessary pieces, and what's the fluff that we can get rid of, stuff like that.
Awesome, Chandler. I remember where I was at when I first heard the statistic, and it blew my mind. And I'll show the audience how simple my brain is. The Houston Rockets. And this is so the NBA basketball playoffs are happening right now. So this is why it brought this to mind. The Houston Rockets were the first team to really capitalize on the 3-point shot. And I remember the GM of the Houston Rockets explaining it this way. He said, okay, if I have a player that shoots from the 4 out of 10, shoots 40%, that's 12 points, because a 3-point basket's worth 3 points. If I have a player shoot 6 for 10, so 60% off a 2-point basket, that's 12 points. So looking at it, I could be less productive on the 3-point line, but actually create more value for my team. So we're not getting rid of the 2-pointer, but we're saying we need to emphasize the 3-point shot. We need to shoot 30 to 40 3-point shots, because if we're just shooting at 40%, or if we get to 45%, we're going to destroy other teams. And they took the NBA by storm, and everybody in the NBA has now changed to that philosophy. Chandler, as you think about education, change management, getting these users that are getting thrown so many software tools used today, Chandler, what's your number one thing that you think needs to change in trying to help users adopt, change their behavior, form these habits? What would be your number one, like the 3-point basket shooting percentage was to me over a 2-point shot? Like, what would you say would be your number one?
Well, Casey, I've been thinking lately about how we can struggle applying what we feel and know personally to the projects that we own. So as an example, most of us individually know that we don't have a lot of time for learning. We know that we're busy and we've got X, Y, and Z to do. We know that like that meeting could have been an email, all this sort of stuff we know. But for something happens when we go into the conference room and we're in charge of leading change and transformation, that perspective leaves us for some reason, right? And we end up reverting to traditional methods because that's what we've been exposed to. Oh, I want someone to change. I want to do something. I want to help them do something different. And rather than kind of bringing our own personal perspective into it of like, oh man, yeah, time is really scarce, attention is really scarce. I don't want to do that as a user. We forget that and we rely on our historical perspectives and heuristics and processes. And we say, okay, well, this is how I have to do it. And it's not even that we recognize this is how I have to do it. It's just like, that's what that's what we do. I'm going to set up a training program. The fact that we still use the word training is indicative of the problem that I'm talking about. Almost no one likes training. No one likes the word training, except for people whose job it is to distribute training. you know, like users aren't just like, lining up every day for the new iPhone and for training. They're just not doing it. And so we just kind of forget those things. And so it's not like bundled up. I don't know how to bundle it up, how you mentioned, like the 3-point shot. But if I were to say anything to this audience, it is like, help me figure out what's happening with people as we go through this like fog and we forget all these kind of common principles. This sort of golden rule of change is like, do unto others as you would want done unto you. Um, I really think we're not spending enough time talking about that and thinking about that and approaching our efforts of learning and transformation from a similar perspective. And call it recency, or recency bias, or just your own personal experience um, with certain things kind of playing into the equation somehow. We just kind of think, well, I work this way, but no one else works this way. No one else does the things I do, um, and and that's not exactly the case. So that's what something I would say we need to talk more about and figure out a little bit better.
Mm. There's the for us by us mentality, right? Meaning I think sometimes we feel like we can divorce ourselves from reality and what we experience and what we want and what we think other people want based off of what we've really like our lived experiences, right? And just go so academic, so far on whatever conventional wisdom is that we end up with something that is not actually nearly as good as it should be. It sounds like that's there's maybe we don't put enough weight in the fact that like we're human, we've experienced things, we know you can kind of there's a sniff test, right, in how this process should work, right? is that
Yeah.
is that fair, Chandler?
Totally. And we probably, I like to think about, something we talk a lot about Brainstorm is like destination learning. Okay. So, and I think it's a real challenge because when you're responsible for distributing learning to a group, like there's this part that calls to us to like lay it out all pretty. Like I want to see it all and I want it all nice and I want it all in one place and all these sort of things. And it's super natural, super logical. Um, and I totally get it. But if we are honest with ourselves, and we put ourselves kind of in front of the mirror and we say like, how many destinations have I gone to for learning recently? That number is very small. It's small. The way we're learning, the way we're adapting, the way we move through our work, our careers doesn't work that same way. Um, we're not always going to the gallery to experience art, right? That art is finding us and we're participating in a whole ton of different ways. We're not always going to the destination. And so to me, that's an example, a more specific example of this kind of this conflict that we have to kind of navigate of what we might want to do or what we might by default be gravitating towards trying, or like that's something we have to do. And I think as we think about modern learners and the modern experience, it might open us up to different approaches that could be much more successful. Now, I'm not saying don't make a portal. I'm not saying do it
Right.
like part of the equation, right? It's part of
Right.
the equation, but sometimes we can fall in love with some things that are part of the story, but they're not main characters.
Mm. It's interesting. Today, I had a conversation with a customer education team, and they were showing me a little bit of the requirements, and they had identified 6 requirements, and they're all features. And I said, That's fantastic, but what are these features supposed to result in? Like, what business outcome are we solving by if we had these 6 features? What would be solved?" And the person sat back and thought about it. I said, hey, the first thing I'm thinking about is, have I enabled my customer to be able to find my resources as quickly and it relates to them as soon as possible? And do I know that they've seen it? Do I know that they're even aware of it? And then once they're aware of it, can I show that they've increased engagement because of it? Meaning they're interacting with the education. And then can I show that they actually changed the behavior? And then can I actually show that they did a habit? And then can I get them to go get certified? And then I go get them to do this? Like, I got to start with the first problem, which is, do they even know it exists? And then keep moving it, right? And they sat back and like, oh, that's interesting. And then they're like, but do you do these capabilities? Can you integrate with all these other systems? And I'm like, wow, we are missing the point here. And so I'm getting to a Todd Kirk long-winded question. I promise it's coming. Todd's pretty good at that one. Uh, Chandler, is this the reason why customer education teams don't sit on the executive teams? They're bouncing from marketing, and then they go under customer success, and then they go and they report to support, but they're never in the leadership. I never hear a chief learning officer. It's rare to ever hear that. Is that because they're losing focus on what the main business outcomes are? What are your thoughts there? Because it just seems like, hey, I spin up a good looking site. I get some people to come. I get some certifications. I'm going to try to grow my certs by 10%. And hey, we just keep on trugging along. Is
Yeah.
that may be it? I don't know.
My
I'm trying to
goodness.
figure this out because to me, customer education is the most scalable way to make impact at an organization. If I was going to invest money, I would invest it in customer education. I actually would invest in customer success managers. I would invest it heavily in customer ed because it's the most scalable thing that can touch the most amount of people, but nobody does.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, isn't customer success necessary because of a lack of customer education, right? Like, so, Casey, it doesn't help. In my opinion, it doesn't help if you're not outcomes focused, if you don't have a big picture of connection and of value, then I don't blame the C-suite from blocking you out, I guess, have to have an understanding. And so just even that example of the relationship between customer education and customer success is an example of where we may be missing the mark, where we feel like, because to me, the C-suite and the boardroom is going to respond to scale and value, outcomes, the big picture game plan. And it's a big, this is the big storyline with product-led growth, and is organizations want to get to product-led growth because it's highly scalable. It doesn't have the limitations of human, hiring and staffing and some of that sort of stuff that just, takes time and has its own set of challenges. If you can get your product to just run on its own, but you have to have customer education for that. But if we're focused on the nitty-gritty and not telling that bigger story and finding that bigger connection to value and scale that customer education inherently has and has always really needed to be about, then yeah, I mean, you're going to find yourself disadvantaged strategically because you're too focused on the minutia of the discipline. You're too focused on the little bitty pieces, but you've lost control of the bigger picture. And so your strategic fate is being decided for you because you're too zeroed in on some specific proxy metrics or some specific capabilities or some legacy thinking. We started the conversation with kind of some legacy thinking that we might fall into some traps on. But we're thinking, well, this is what customer education, the discipline, says we should do. So let's focus on building out this practice. We need to have X or Y or Z. We have to do those things. And yeah, you're going to miss the opportunity. I think you're going to miss the opportunity to kind of strategically guide your organization forward to greater value, to greater success, because you're focused on something that's a step rather than a leap, kind of deal.
Mm. I was talking with a friend who's in a leadership position in a non-SaaS company, and their organization is going through some pretty major changes right now. And the executive leadership team sent out like a survey for like a ask us anything kind of a thing, which can be pretty dangerous. Some companies, when they go through major changes, they'll do that. And they were kind of commiserating with me about the fact that while they're going through this change, all of the feedback that they got, all the questions that they got, that for them as the executive felt super loaded. Meaning like the employees at the organization were basically saying, um, we don't know why you're doing this. We don't feel confident in this change. And it kind of like they were really defensive with me, like Todd, I don't know what to do. Like this is crazy. Like feels like everybody here is just second guessing every decision that the leadership team is making.
Mm,
And I tried to spin it with them to basically say, well, maybe you're looking at it the wrong way. Maybe your employees are super, super invested and they really care about what you're trying to do. And so they just want to feel involved. They want to feel like they have ownership in this change and you're not giving it to them. And that was a perspective that they hadn't thought of before. Casey said I ask like really long lead up questions, so I'm trying to do that with this one intentionally. But from your perspective, like in that type of a situation, where would you spend your time? Because I would guess there's probably fault on both sides, right? Like there's at least a disconnect that exists between leadership and the employees in the organization, and like what can be done to help with that? Because in my experience, and here's my very long, this is the whole setup, to go off of Casey's whole point before, I feel like a lot of the times, customer education folks that I talk to feel like they're the employee wishing they had a seat at the table asking that question. And in this case, it felt like all the employees were saying, I wish I had a seat at the table. I wish I had a chance to provide direction to the organization. I don't. So one, what would be your advice to the employees who are struggling, who are maybe lashing out in the organization in unhealthy ways? And what would your advice be to leaders in the organization to say, here's how you might be able to help with that change?
mm, okay. I I have a little. Uh, I don't even know who said the quote the first. Honestly, quick AI search would probably solve this problem for us. But
I'm on it.
I,
I'll do
I
it. Let me
have
hear
this
from.
little quote on my screen that says, "Those who plan the battle don't battle the plan." I think it might have been Napoleon, honestly, but it could have been anybody. Those that plan the battle don't battle the plan. Now, one, it can be frustrated when you're not being asked to plan the battle. Okay. You're not being asked to be a part of the future planning and strategizing of an organization. And maybe we'll circle back to that. But if you're a leader in change, don't forget that. Um, I've got a little bit of a background in change management, and the acronym I try to keep close during any transformation and any change initiative is ICE. ICE. It doesn't mean something fun, but it's three words that I think are really important. Maybe you can come up with a fun way to use ICE. Intentional, clear, and empathetic. Okay. If you're going to do change right, you need to be intentional, you need to be clear, you need to be empathetic. And any lack thereof in one of those categories can lead to some difficult situations. If you're really intentional about the change and you're really empathetic about the change, I think you find ways to help people feel like they're planning the battle. They're helping participate in the change. They have a voice. Now, not every employee is going to be a part of the decision on whether we move HQ or not. That's not the point. You're not saying, hey, everyone vote on the next place. But how are you in empowering people to feel like they have a voice and that they're participating in the direction and future of the company? And it takes a little creativity to get there. It all depends on your context and your change, right? So like, let's take AI, for example. Now, not everyone's going to get to choose what AI tools we use and what we can use AI for and what we can't use AI for. But we can help people shape the future of AI in their contexts and spaces. So inviting them to participate as a community in the team, share your use cases, share broadly. Hey, we've got this big open forum for AI use cases. Share that sort of stuff. People can start to feel like I've got a voice, like I've got somewhere I can put this energy, and that's a really good thing. And so, if you're a leader through transformation, I hope you think about those sort of things. How do I bring people in a meaningful way? And it is not about putting everyone in the meeting with you at the same time. That's not the point, because I think at first, kind of, as people kind of interact with that idea, they're like, well, what are you talking about? Like, too many cooks in the kitchen. Not everybody can be part of planning the battle. And I think that person's probably taking the quote a little too literally, and needs to just be thinking about the point, which is we've got to find ways to keep people included and help them feel a part of it. Now, if you're on the other side of the equation, you feel like you're not part of the strategy and you're asked to walk the line, that's where I think we all should be working on our leading up toolkit. you know um, how do we continue to develop our value, our skills, our ability to communicate and collaborate to the point where someone wants you to be a part of it? And so that's all that, speaking to what I think are some general sort of change management best practices, things to be thinking about, all that. In the context of customer education, Todd, if you're a CE leader and you're outside of the boardroom and you don't feel like you're being a part of the plan, part of the battle, then that's the leading up toolkit, is like, how do I continue to develop the value that we are providing at a high level, at a big picture level, not just like, hey, I went from 10% to 15% on something. Casey, you gave an example like certifications. Like, okay, that's a good metric. But what makes that a great metric is if it connects to the bigger picture, and having that bigger picture, when you can develop that, when you can vocalize and share that bigger picture, and you're going to attract involvement as you show yourself as an individual that can lead organizations, not just execute. Okay. When you're hanging your hat on, percent increase on any one particular metric, then you're probably more in the execution camp than the leadership camp of what you're trying to accomplish. And so how do you lead up? And as you continue to do more of that, again, connecting to your organization's mission, the big picture, I think you're going to find yourself with greater opportunities, because you're going to make yourself a visible leader in the organization, and the leadership's going to start to say, that's someone we got to be talking to more. We just got to understand their mind. We got to have them be a part of some things a little bit more, and put the energy into it. And I think you're going to open up some doors for yourself.
Chandler, that's a great intro into a post you just barely made on LinkedIn. So if you haven't been following Chandler, follow him on LinkedIn. Chandler, you also have a thing around AI that you're doing on YouTube. So first, let people know how to find you on LinkedIn and on YouTube. But talk to people about this post that you made that you just found so insightful about a car washing company and what they're doing, because you wouldn't associate that to change management. And then maybe what's one or two off the wall type of things that you're trying as you're looking for people to develop these new work habits. So one, talk to you about your post, how to find you, why was this post so interesting, and what's a couple things that you're trying out of the box to get people to again change those behaviors.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Chandler Milne. I think that's my main URL. Happy to connect and chat and do all that sort of stuff. I'm a pretty casual LinkedIn user. Trying not to let AI take over my LinkedIn account, which I'm sure all of you have appreciated some of that happening. And then from a YouTube perspective, actually that probably connects to one of your like, what are we trying sort of thing. We've got a little YouTube channel kind of going, and it's called The Right Click AI. And our objective when we started that YouTube channel is AI is moving so fast that our traditional ability to provide structured, high quality, high value information to learners is lagging behind the speed of AI. So there's that delta. Like, how do I help people that want to or need to stay on the bleeding edge a little bit more? How do I support that group? And, Brainstorm's evolving rapidly. How we develop our content, how we develop our learning experiences. How do we take advantage of the transformative, augmentative capabilities of AI when it comes to developing learning and change resources? And that's a process. I think the whole world's going through this process of like, how do I get the most out of AI? Because the value's 100% there. We just got to we've got to change. AI's got to evolve. It's this partnership, right? So we're trying to do that while also starting to support this bleeding edge audience a little bit better. And it's a small thing, right? But we're just trying to figure out how do we help someone, a knowledge worker that is like, hey, I know the value of AI. I just want to stay up to date with what the latest is that's applicable to me. I don't care what has happening in Wall Street. I just want to know what can I do on Monday that I couldn't do today with AI at work. And so we try to keep people up to date with some of the latest and greatest for knowledge workers, as well as some applicable skills from time to time, things we've noticed people haven't tried or knocked into. And so, yeah, I think it relates well to what we try to do as an organization, which is let's help people kind of unlock new capability and unlock new stuff. So you mentioned this LinkedIn post a couple of days ago, Quick Quack Car Wash. Now they're growing rapidly. Here in Utah, they've got quite the presence.
I go there every week.
Yeah. They've got a great business model, a lot of really exciting things. So they posted this just a couple of days ago that they had reimagined their towels. So I don't know, for those of you that subscribe to one of these kind of new car washes, you go through the car wash and you can vacuum your car, and they've got the air hoses, and then they've got towels and sort of spray bottles so you can do some more fine detail work. And every time I've gone to the car wash before they made this change, I had started to notice that people were throwing the towels away. And in the back of my mind, I was like, this is unsustainable. Like, they're just losing these towels because they're not paper towels. They're like actual like chamois, microfiber things like that are useful. I just remember thinking, man, there's no way Quick Quack can keep this up. And then this week,
as one of those subscribers, I've never thrown a towel away, but I will say it is always also very confusing because I would go in there and I wouldn't be sure which ones were the clean towels and which ones were the dirty towels because the way they did it, like, it's like people weren't putting them in the proper place, and you grab me like, this thing's all soaking wet, like, and it's in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
So that also annoyed me too.
Totally agree. It was talk about clarity, right? There was total lack of clarity. Like, there's a shelf and then there's a top shelf, and which one's clean or not. And the employees were just throwing the rags in, so they weren't folded. So you didn't know if anyways, it was wild. So they made a change that I thought was so smart. They changed where you put the used rags. They turned it into a basketball hoop. And man, so what they did, I think, is a masterclass in change, because there's the dispenser for the clean towels, and then you shoot the dirty ones in the hoop. And it makes me think of a long time ago, I read this book on change management, and it had this example that always stuck out to me. Is I have kids and I love my kids, but I have 5 children, and it is a life struggle to teach them to clean up after themselves. And that's just my job as a parent, is to try to teach them to do that. But we regularly deal with mess, right? And in this change management book, they gave this example of how, like, hey, if your child is struggling to put away their car toys, it's not about telling them to clean up after themselves more and more. It's, why aren't you thinking about how to make cleanup part of playtime? And so in this example, the person was like, so I made a parking garage for their cars, and now part of playtime is parking the cars away. And not every toy may work that way, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, so change isn't just about sending a bunch of emails. It's not about as a parent just telling my kids clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up, or telling your users use AI, use AI, use AI, use AI, use AI, or use this feature, this, right? That's not all what change is. It's also about shaping the environment. And what Quick Quack did, I think, is an absolute perfect example of shaping the environment. They made the right behavior, not only the obvious one, the clear one, but also kind of the fun one of like, yeah, I want to dunk the ball. And I'm going to go put my rag where it goes. And it's really clear. And there's this moment of joy that you get to participate in when you're cleaning your car, which may not be your favorite task, right? So what can we do, right? As we're leading transformation, we want users to adopt our technologies, take advantage of the latest and greatest, or even just like get on board in the first place. We can communicate. We can provide learning. But what can we do to shape the environment? How do we do something like that? And I think it takes a little creativity. I was thinking about AI recently, and in that context, you guys, I was thinking, well, okay, aside from myself, so like Casey and Todd, aside from yourselves individually, who at work has the greatest effect on your environment? What would you say to that question?
Trying to decide if
My
this. I'm trying to
my
decide if this.
manager and the person that I think is like most productive. Like, you have those influencers at work that you're like, man, they get everything done. They're high achievers. Those are two things. If my boss is telling me I have to do it, and then as I notice other high performers, because I want to
Peers
be a
that
high
you want to
performer.
emulate.
Yeah. Those would be my two.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I felt the same way when I was thinking about that, because I was thinking, I saw that post and I was like, okay. So if we're trying to help people embrace AI, but fill in the blank, whether it's AI or something else, right? I want them to do something else. Now, there's a lot of tools in the toolkit, but if we're thinking about this one specific example of like shape the environment, I'm like, well, who has the greatest influence on an employee's environment? And I came to a similar place. I'm interested to hear the audience's feedback on that too. Like, what else? What else? Who else is shaping the environment? And when you start thinking like that, I think it starts to open up that creativity. Creativity loves constraint. So if I'm thinking managers, okay, they shape the environment maybe more than anybody else. They shape work. What can we do with managers that we haven't done before? How can we shape the experience that they create for their users in the context of our technology or our change that we want to have happen? And I think that opens up discussion that you can have with your team right now. It's like, whoa, yeah, what are we doing for managers? How do we get to managers? How do we give them a toolkit for transformation? How do we help them create a basketball hoop where their users just dunk it for, because they like it and it's the right thing? What can we do? Peers, great one too, right? Champions and high performers. And what can we do with that group to, mobilize them and do some cool stuff? And I think that's fun. So that was the post from LinkedIn that I just thought was, gosh, that was so cool.
Chandler, I think I'm curious. The thing that came to my mind as you mentioned that, I was like, well, the environment's kind of complicated today, though, right? Because in the last 5 years, the shift of the amount of people who are like co-located with their colleagues has changed a lot, right? So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, almost 22% of U.S. workers are totally remote, and over 50% are in a hybrid scenario, right? Like Casey lives an hour away from the office, so he's only here every once in a while. And so, which honestly still leaves about 30 or so percent who are all the time co-located with their peers and with their colleagues and with their manager potentially. But what would you say? Is there anything that we can think about when we're dealing with the fact that, the environment isn't necessarily shaped by face-to-face interactions only now too? We have to now use technology to connect us. And sometimes you can use technology as a bridge or you can use it as a dam. So which one is, how are we actually doing it?
I've been thinking about how much do we really know about our audience? And gosh, isn't that so important to know who you're speaking to? So Todd, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, first off, it's pretty important to understand what group you're talking to out of those three groups. And they probably all need a little bit of a different message in different areas and different contexts. And so I remember years ago when I went through my first sort of change management certification process. And I remember going through that for a week or so and, you know, taking the tests and doing all that sort of stuff and going and just being exposed to this super vast toolkit. And it was impressive and it was exciting. Um, and I'm not like I don't deserve any credit from this, but I do remember walking away from that thinking, "Oh boy, that's a lot. Like that's a lot to do." Um, and the world was slower then. And it's just like that's funny because we could say that about last week. The world was slower last week. Um, let alone, years ago. And so there is a big part of the toolkit of all the things you could do and try that we just don't have the time or the resources to do. But readiness is one that's kind of come back to my mind of like, gosh, we need to keep finding ways to assess readiness and better understand our audience. And that's that whole the whole discipline of assessing readiness is a big part of like understanding your audience and doing all that sort of stuff. Now we got to find ways intelligently and scalably to do that, to kind of figure that out better. And I think AI offers us like this really awesome toolkit to do that, um, to like speed it up and make it more palatable and make it fit within our change initiatives and to do it much more quickly than like, okay, I'm going to do 7 rounds of surveying and then I'm going to do, you know, group sessions and I'm going to do one-on-ones and all this sort of stuff. And I mean, I can't even finish that sentence without like an executive sponsor being like, I'm asleep, like I can't make it through that. So let's figure out how to do that. Let's figure out how to get more intelligence, assess the readiness, assess the circumstances of our audience so that we can, tailor that message. And none of us have a magic wand. If someone does, please tell me, like, I'd love to be your friend. That's not how this works. It's through intentionality, right? So coming back to intentionality and clarity and empathy, you just got to be intentional. You got to be willing to sit in the driver's seat, try some stuff out. And you're going to be more successful if you know that like, oh, my audience is fully remote. So I need to figure out how to speak their language and empower them with a set of next steps and resources that make sense for them versus those that are all in HQ, and any of the other circumstances. There's probably a lot more trial and error in driving change than people appreciate. We all want the easy button. We all want to be sold the easy button. We want to buy the easy button. We want to push the easy button, and then we want to tell everyone that we did all the work. But sometimes you got to sit in it and be like, okay, let's give this a try. Let's use some data. Let's figure out where we can get better. Let's talk to people, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Chandler, I guess that's my question: is there an easy button, or are we just that's the reason why change isn't actually taking place is because it's hard, right? Like we always say, go slow to go fast, right? And I think everybody's skipping that because my product's easy to use and I can vibe code and have a product out in 2 seconds and then here you go. And are we misleading? Are we all misleading each other? Or the blind leading the blind here by everybody assuming that it is easy?
Easy and fair are two like words that I kind of wish didn't exist, you know? Life's not fair and there's very few things that are easy. The only thing that's easy is to like expand my waistline. That's the easiest thing I know how to do. But the things that really matter, they take work. That's why like in that acronym ICE, first one up, intentionality. Like you got to be in it to win it. Or else you're going to struggle to produce the results that you're looking for when it comes to driving change. We we all know this. It's like saying the sky is blue and grass likes to be green when it's wet, when it's watered. Change is hard. It's hard. And anyone that's selling you just like this easy button, here's how, is probably doing you a disservice. Their marketing people and their product people aren't talking to each other very well, right? I think it can be easier, definitely. I think the process can be facilitated. And there's a lot of lessons the world has learned that people forget to learn or need to relearn. And the right kind of partners to help you drive change are the ones that have logged those lessons and are building a foundation upon it and moving forward. I think you're going to, my personal opinion, of course, as all of this is, I think uh, we'll do ourselves a lot of good if we let the words easy and fair just drift into the background and just focus on getting to work, because our circumstances aren't always going to be equivalent for what we're trying to do. X team got more resources than I did, and I've got a skeleton crew trying to do this thing, and that group over there has got all the money in the world to do whatever they want. That it's an unproductive, fairness trap. And my product's so awesome, adoption will be easy. I think that's pretty hilarious to even think about right now, because I can't think of a technology as easy to use as AI. I use my words and I click one button. Like, humanity has figured out how to make the easiest experience. The hard thing is that, like, it's my brain. Like, what do I tell it to do? How do I use it? And I'm oversimplifying there, of course, because there's a lot of complexity that lives in, the extended use cases. But hopefully you get my drift of, like, there's really not an easier product to use than like an AI prompt box, because you just use words and you click enter. So technology is, no matter how well your UX team has, put together the product, your biggest barrier might not be ease of use. It's, why the heck should I use it? And that's a story that needs to be told. It's not an easy one, because you got to compete for attention. And you've got to bring relevancy, like we were talking about earlier. You got to do a whole lot of stuff that just makes it more involved than sometimes we want it to be.
Yeah. It's so true. Chandler, this has been a therapy session, as all of our conversations are generally. It's hence why we call it SaaS Therapy. And, the last question we always ask our guests is, if you could be the therapist for our audience and give them one homework assignment based off what we talked about today, what would it be, man? Like, what do we tell people to do with all this information?
As you're saying that, Todd, the first thing that came to my mind is take a moment for, however you want to shape it, a little personal affirmation, like, you're doing this, okay? Like, you matter. The work that you do has great potential and possibility. The struggle may be real to get buy-in, to get resources, to get data, whatever that fill in the blank might be. But, like, there is so much value in unlocking the capability that exists in your product. And it's a little bit hard, but, first thing comes to mind is just like, know that we know and we get it. You have a community that probably gets it as well. And the fight's worth fighting. And then that second piece is just related to the fight, is be intentional, be clear, be empathetic, but just know that it's not going to be easy. Sometimes it's not going to be fair. Let's go get to work. Let's have a big picture vision of our value. Let's be communicative about that so that we can gain more resources and gain more support, and keep grinding. Keep grinding. Like, you got this. And there's a lot of questions and more questions than answers sometimes, but you got this. Keep going. Be intentional, be clear, be empathetic with what you're trying to accomplish. Know that you have value and continue to try to connect and see the bigger version of that value so that you have more influence in the organization and you can do even more good than you're doing even today.
Love it. Thanks, Chandler. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. As always, new episodes released every Wednesday. If you're not following, you're missing out, because then you can come and meet awesome guys like Chandler. Follow him on LinkedIn. Check out the Right Click AI on YouTube. And thanks, everybody. And thanks again, Chandler, for joining us today.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Chandler. Thanks, TK.
Thanks.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.